There comes a moment in the life of every chosen one when silence begins to speak louder than words, when your tears say more than your voice ever could, when you look back at all you've endured, not just the visible battles, but the hidden ones, and realize you were never truly alone. You were watched, you were measured, and most of all, you were preserved, because the pain they caused was real, but what heaven was preparing through that pain is greater. You didn't fight back. You didn't expose them. You didn't beg to be understood. You kept moving, quietly, obediently, even when your soul was shattered, even when the betrayal came from the ones you trusted most. They thought you were weak because you didn't strike. They thought they'd won because you disappeared. But what they never understood is that your retreat wasn't defeat. It was protection. God pulled you back to elevate you without their interference. And now the final hour has come, not for you, but for them. For every enemy who laughed while you bled, for every mouth that lied, for every hand that tried to bury you. What they didn't know is that your burial was actually a planting. And in this hour, what they tried to kill will rise, not in anger, but in anointing. Because divine justice never rushes. It waits until the silence becomes undeniable, until the weight of what was done demands a spiritual answer, and that answer has arrived. So if your spirit is trembling as you hear this, if something deep inside of you knows this is not just another message, but a direct word to your soul, then don't scroll past. Stay with me until the end. And if you already feel the truth rising in you, comment 111 below and subscribe to Wisdom Ascension. This isn't revenge. This is restoration. And this is the beginning of your rise. It was never about what you did wrong. It was never because you were too loud, too quiet, too confident, too sensitive. The truth is, many of the attacks you've endured had nothing to do with your behavior, and everything to do with your presence. You walked into places where darkness had become comfortable, and your light exposed what others wanted hidden. Not with words, not with confrontation, but just by being who you are. You've probably noticed it for years. People disliking you before they even know your name, feeling judged without speaking, being excluded without explanation. And you've asked yourself, what did I do? But the question was never about what you did. It was about what you carry. There is a frequency in you that unsettles spirits that have grown too used to silence, a purity that confronts what others are still trying to conceal, a fire that burns through illusions they've worked hard to maintain. And to those who are not ready to heal, your presence feels like a threat. Many of the people who hurt you didn't even understand why they did it. They just reacted. Their spirit recognized your authority before their mind could, and in a world where power is often stolen, borrowed, or manipulated, authentic light is dangerous. You didn't come with masks. You came with truth. You didn't come to fit in. You came to awaken. And that kind of energy disturbs what pretends to be in control. That's why relationships suddenly shifted. Why spaces you once felt safe in became tight and tense. Why smiles turned into silence. The moment your spirit started rising, so did the resistance. But it wasn't personal. It was prophetic. The enemy of your soul saw what you couldn't yet see, that you were being positioned, that your light was increasing, that the authority within you was awakening. And so the attacks began, not to stop your journey, but to distract you long enough that you'd doubt you ever had one. But chosen one, hear this clearly. Their attacks were proof of your purpose. Their discomfort was evidence of your anointing. Their rejection was the confirmation you didn't know you needed, because if you weren't carrying something sacred, they would have left you alone. But heaven put something in you too powerful to go unnoticed, too radiant to be ignored, and too eternal to be extinguished. So stop apologizing for your presence. Stop questioning your worth. Stop shrinking just to survive spaces that were never built to hold someone like you. Your light was never meant to blend in. It was meant to break patterns, shift atmospheres, and lead others out of darkness. even if they hated you for it. The world has twisted the idea of karma into a punchline. Something people throw around in anger, a quick wish for revenge when someone does them wrong. But karma, real, spiritual karma, is not an outburst of rage. It doesn't scream, it doesn't rush, it doesn't need attention. It waits. And when it moves, it does so with precision and power that no human hand could ever orchestrate. Because karma isn't about payback. It's about balance. When someone wounds a chosen one, they are not just harming a person. They are interrupting a divine timeline. They are interfering with a soul that was placed on earth to heal, to build, to awaken. And while the chosen one may not respond with retaliation, heaven always responds with order. The attack may go unnoticed by people, but never by God. Every lie told, every trap set, every betrayal hidden behind a smile, none of it is forgotten. Because in the kingdom, silence does not mean absence. It means preparation. You may have thought your suffering was invisible, that your tears didn't matter, that your restraint meant no justice would come. But spiritual justice isn't reactive, it's restorative. God doesn't simply return what was taken, He multiplies it. He doesn't just expose what was hidden, He elevates the one who was buried. And when that happens, those who once mocked your pain will have to witness your rise, not because you demanded it, but because you endured it. And this is the part most people don't understand. Karma doesn't come to destroy, it comes to teach, to realign, to force accountability where there was once arrogance, to awaken conscience where there was once cruelty. So when heaven begins to move, it's not about punishing your enemies. It's about showing them what they refused to see, that their actions had weight, that their choices had consequences, and that no attack on a child of God goes without spiritual response. You see, the chosen don't need to defend themselves. Their life becomes the defense. Their peace becomes the protest. And their elevation becomes the evidence. Because when God allows karma to manifest, it's not just to correct the past, it's to protect the future, to ensure that those who move with darkness will no longer have access to what was born in the light. So if you've been waiting for closure, waiting for apology, waiting for someone to finally understand what they did to you, let it go. Not because it didn't matter, but because heaven already answered. And the answer is unfolding, slowly, divinely, unmistakably. This is not revenge. This is balance. This is God making all things right. There's something that happens when people see your silence and assume you have no voice. When they witness your humility and mistake it for helplessness. When they hurt you, walk away, and convince themselves you're too weak to rise. Too broken to speak, too forgotten to matter. And in their illusion, they laugh. They celebrate. They believe the battle is over. But what they never understood is that you were never fighting them to begin with. You weren't silent because you were afraid. You were silent because you were led. You didn't walk away because you lacked strength. You walked away because you respected the calling on your life too much to stay where your soul was being dishonored. And that decision, that quiet, powerful decision to not fight in the flesh, to not trade insult for insult, is exactly what preserved your throne. Because chosen ones are not raised through revenge. They are raised through restraint. They thought you were finished. They saw you lose people, lose places, lose everything that looked like stability, and they thought that meant they'd won. But they didn't know that everything you lost was clearing space for what God was about to release. They didn't know that while they were watching your fall, heaven was preparing your rise. They didn't know that your power doesn't come from validation, but from alignment. And the moment you said no more, you didn't lose ground. You gained authority. Now they watch you in confusion. They hear your name in places they never thought you'd reach. They sense your peace, and it disturbs their spirit. Because deep down, they know. They know they underestimated you. They know they misjudged you. And for the first time, they realize the one they tried to bury was actually the one who carried the seed. So let this truth settle in your soul. The fact that they thought you were powerless is the greatest proof that your power was never something the world could define. It was hidden, protected, sacred, and now that it's rising, they won't be able to look away. Not because you want revenge, but because your obedience made room for justice. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or mistreated by people who thought you'd never recover, leave a comment below with, "I was never powerless." Say it not just for others to read, but for your own spirit to remember. Say it to agree with heaven. Say it because now, they're about to see what they tried to silence. You may not have seen it. You may have wondered if anyone truly did. But every moment you chose peace over retaliation, every time you swallowed pain just to keep your dignity, every night you wept in secret and still woke up with grace the next day, heaven was taking notes. And not with judgment, but with reverence. Because there is a kind of strength that doesn't shout, a kind of holiness that walks away without applause, a kind of obedience that only God truly sees. And that's exactly what you lived. For so long, it felt like injustice had the final word. Like the ones who broke you walked away smiling while you were left picking up the pieces. You questioned if God even saw it, if your quiet endurance mattered in a world that glorifies noise and force. But the silence of heaven was never absence. It was collection. He was collecting every tear, every sigh, every hidden heartbreak and storing it as evidence. Not to remind you of the pain, but to justify the release. Because God does not move on impulse. He moves on timing. His justice doesn't react, it completes. And when the time arrives, the shift is undeniable. Suddenly, what was imbalanced begins to correct itself. What was stolen starts returning, and those who once looked untouchable begin to feel the weight of their own actions. Not because you cursed them, but because the scales were never meant to stay tipped forever. This is that moment, the season when silence becomes vindication, when what they thought they got away with becomes their lesson. When the one they thought was finished begins to rise with peace they can't comprehend. You didn't force this moment into being. You didn't beg for it, manipulate it, or orchestrate it. It came because it was owed. Not as revenge, but as spiritual order. And what's most powerful is that your heart is still clean. You're not waiting to see them fall. You're simply ready to walk in your truth. And that's what makes this justice unstoppable. Because God's not just vindicating your name, He's honoring your posture, He's rewarding your restraint, and He's elevating you in a way that no one can deny, not even those who tried to erase you. So walk forward now, not with bitterness, but with clarity, because the scales are moving, and this time, they're moving in your favor. There's a kind of strength the world still can't comprehend, a power that doesn't need to prove itself. A dignity that doesn't lower itself to meet chaos. And that's the kind of spirit you carry. That's why you didn't fight the way they expected you to. That's why you didn't strike back when you were wounded. Because somewhere deep inside you, even when your heart was breaking, you knew that your identity wasn't tied to the battle. It was tied to the throne. You were never meant to trade insults with those beneath your frequency. You were never created to argue for what heaven already approved. And when you chose to stay silent, to walk away, to protect your peace instead of proving a point, it wasn't cowardice, it was royalty in motion. Because kings and queens don't chase rumors, they don't beg to be seen, they don't crumble when misunderstood. They move with the quiet assurance that their presence is purpose enough. They expected rage, they expected scandal, they expected you to break down and expose your wounds. But instead, you disappeared into the silence. And in that silence, you rose. You didn't retaliate because your soul had already outgrown the battlefield. You didn't entertain their chaos because you were being trained for clarity, for leadership, for impact that cannot be shaken by noise. And now, you're beginning to see what that decision protected. Your name is still intact. Your integrity is still whole. Your energy is still clean. You didn't let their darkness stain your future. And that is why your rise will be unlike anything they imagined, because you stayed loyal to your light. You knew that God would deal with what you couldn't, that the universe would handle what was never yours to carry, and so you released. That kind of strength is rare. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it doesn't post receipts or demand apologies. It simply keeps walking in purpose, until everything that tried to bring it down is forced to watch it soar. You are not vengeful, you are chosen, and chosen ones don't answer the enemy's call, they answer heaven's. That's why you're still standing, that's why your peace is returning, and that's why everything that was lost will be restored, without you ever needing to fight for it in the flesh. It might be hard to believe at first, that the very pain meant to break you was actually the pressure that birthed you, that the betrayal you barely survived was the tool that shaped your clarity, that the rejection you never deserved was exactly what triggered your rise. But in the spiritual realm, nothing is wasted. Not even the weapons formed against you, because what the enemy meant for destruction, God allowed for activation. The chosen don't just discover their purpose and comfort, they awaken to it through fire, through wilderness, through silence, and through pain. And whether they realized it or not, your enemies were helping to ignite something inside you that ease never could. They challenged you, yes, but they also revealed your resilience. They exposed your weakness, but only so your strength could finally emerge. And now, you're not the same person who cried behind closed doors. You're not the same soul that once questioned your worth. You've been changed, not by their power, but by your response to it. You didn't know it at the time, but every attack pushed you closer to your calling. Every closed door redirected you toward alignment. Every lie forced you to find truth within yourself. And in doing so, something sacred awakened, something that had been waiting, hidden, untouched, until the pressure forced it to rise. That's what anointing is. It's not given lightly. It's drawn out through the journey. And now when you speak, there's weight in your words. When you walk into a room, there's authority in your presence, because you're not moving from emotion anymore. You're moving from assignment. You've been sharpened, tempered, refined, and you have them to thank, not because they blessed you, but because they tried to break you. And in doing so, they exposed what they could never take away, your divine identity. So don't curse the process. Don't regret the pain. Don't wish it never happened, because had they not pushed you, you might have never discovered what was already living inside of you. And now that it's awake, nothing will ever be the same again. Not for you, and not for those who tried to keep you hidden. It's easy to look at everything that happened and crave some form of reckoning. To want those who caused pain to finally feel it. To want closure wrapped in consequences. But the final hour isn't about punishment. It's about something far more powerful. It's about restoration. And restoration doesn't need anyone to fall. It simply lifts what was buried. It redeems what was forgotten. It rebuilds what was torn down. And it does so without needing to destroy others to make room. Because God is not just the God of justice. He is the God of wholeness. He restores in a way that silence cannot deny and darkness cannot undo. This moment is not coming to satisfy your pain. It's coming to fulfill your promise. Everything you lost along the way, the time, the confidence, the relationships, the resources, the identity, none of it is gone. It was preserved, protected, hidden until the right moment. And now, it's returning. But it's not returning to the old version of you. It's coming back to someone who has been refined. Someone who now carries discernment, authority, and vision. The person you are now is the version heaven always intended to receive the restoration. That's why it took so long. That's why it hurt so deeply. Because you had to become the vessel that could handle what was being returned. This is not about proving anything to anyone. It's not about walking in rooms and demanding respect. It's about walking in peace, moving in confidence, knowing that nothing that happened was wasted, and that everything that's coming is divine compensation for the things you endured in silence. You will begin to see relationships heal, not because you begged for them, but because you no longer need them to validate you. You will watch opportunities open, not because you forced them, but because the atmosphere around you has changed. and you will feel yourself rising, not in pride, but in quiet alignment. That's what restoration looks like. It's not loud, it's not angry, it's not revengeful, it's holy. So when it begins to unfold, receive it fully, without guilt, without fear, without shrinking. This isn't too good to be true. It's what was promised from the beginning. And now, the final hour is revealing what was always yours. There will be no announcement, no warning, no dramatic confrontation. But there will be a moment, quiet, undeniable, divine, when those who once hurt you will see you rise. And in that moment, they will remember. Not because you reminded them, not because you threw it in their face, but because the light on your life will be too radiant to ignore, and their soul will whisper the truth they tried so hard to silence. This is how heaven works. It doesn't seek revenge, it reveals contrast. It doesn't humiliate, it humbles. And as you step into the spaces that once rejected you, as you walk in favor that once felt impossible, those who thought they erased you will feel the weight of what they did, not through punishment, but through presence. Your rise will be the mirror they can't look away from, and what's most beautiful about it is that you won't need their apology anymore. You won't even desire it, because you'll be too full, too aligned, too elevated to be haunted by what no longer defines you. You won't carry bitterness, you'll carry breakthrough. You won't chase closure, you'll walk in completion. And that shift, that quiet redemption, will speak volumes. They'll remember how they treated you when you were down, how they dismissed your worth, how they betrayed your loyalty. And while you won't say a word, your life will testify. The tables are not just turning, they're returning to their rightful balance. And this time, you won't need to prove a thing. You will simply stand, shine, and move forward, while they process the weight of what was lost. And that is enough. Enough for your soul to finally breathe. Enough for your heart to stop rehearsing what happened. Enough for your spirit to feel free again. Because your rise was never about revenge. It was about becoming who you were always meant to be. And now, everyone will see what God was shaping all along. Chosen one, if you've come this far, it's not by accident. These words didn't reach you by coincidence. Something in your spirit has been waiting, aching for this confirmation, not just of what you went through, but of what you're becoming. And now you know, every tear, every betrayal, every silent season had a purpose. Not to punish you, but to prepare you. You were never overlooked. You were never abandoned. You were being formed in fire because your mission could not be built on ease. It had to be forged in truth. This is the hour where everything begins to align, where the broken pieces of your past no longer feel like shame, but like sacred tools. Where the things that once confused you now start to make sense. And the people who tried to bury you, they're about to witness the version of you that couldn't have emerged any other way. Do not fear what's coming. Do not shrink from the blessing. You are not stepping into luck. You are stepping into prophecy, into justice, into balance, into divine restoration. And if something deep in your soul knows this message was for you, then leave a comment with 111. Not for me, but as a sign to the heavens that you heard, you received, and you remember who you are. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Wisdom Ascension now, because this is only the beginning. You're not just watching a video, you're awakening to your calling. You're being revealed now, because the world needs your light.